President Trump announces his new national security advisor, Robert Obrien. So for more on this, let's bring in Face the Nation moderator and senior foreign affairs correspondent Margaret Brennan. She's joining us now from Washington. So, Margaret, let's first start with the president announcing his new national security advisor. What can you tell us about Robert Obrien and how he'll impact the Trump administration's foreign policy?
Well, first of all, just having someone in the job should be huge. It's been a strain not having that job of national security advisor filled in the past few days, given the level of crisis out there. Robert Obrien is currently at the State Department. He's been acting as an envoy for hostage affairs. He's a California Republican. He's worked with a number of Republican candidates in the past on past campaigns. He's a lawyer. He's someone, though, who has not been very high-ranking in the State Department, but he's had high-profile roles for President Trump, who has said and campaigned on this promise of bringing Americans home. This is a job that he currently has as hostage envoy. It was created by the Obama administration after, if you remember, how painful it was for the families of those held by ISIS to be kind of lost in the American bureaucracy. The Trump administration kept that role, put Robert Obrien in it, and his ability to have brought at least some Americans home from places like Yemen and other sort of troubled areas has impressed the president. These sort of transactions, being able to bring these people into the Oval Office to be greeted by the president, is something that he's really enjoyed, and so he's had this direct relationship with Obrien himself. Moving him into this role, though, will also mean that someone with a very direct line to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will be in this position of authority. That's going to be key to keeping sort of the troops in line there. John Bolton, who had departed the role, and Mike Pompeo had really been at odds over the past few months, sort of jostling for control. Now, the question is just what kind of job is Obrien going to do? Condoleezza Rice, who in the Bush administration held the job of Secretary of State and at a earlier time National Security Advisor, said the NSA has to be the president's alter ego. The NSA has to be there running meetings, making sure the president gets a variety of opinions and options, not that they're cherry picking a certain outcome. And that was one of the allegations against John Bolton, that he was really pushing for more military confrontation and so hawkish that perhaps he wasn't giving as much weight in selecting information for the president that showed other avenues. He's no longer in the room. Obrien will be.
So the thing about John Bolton, though, Margaret, is we all knew where he stood. We all knew he was hawkish because he broadcasted it, on cable TV all the time. And I think there was a concern with his departure that the president would just pick someone who would just sort of go along with his point of view. Do we have any idea about Obrien and whether or not he's the kind of person who would stand up to the president if he heard something that he didn't think was right?
Well, Obrien is a longtime Republican. He's been a Republican for longer than the President of the United States has. So he's got more traditional conservative foreign policy views. He is someone who is accepted by conservative foreign policy circles. He's not someone that you would classify in the same way as John Bolton, who was often viewed as ideological, as you described it, very rooted, very clear in his point of view, and often really not moving from that. But the job you ask about is really one that's kind of operational, and that's where John Bolton was really strong. He was a creature of the U.S. government bureaucracy. He knew how to make things happen, and he was someone who could really work the system. Sometimes, his critics said, worked it in a way that only kind of hit his priorities and not those pushed by other members of the foreign policy or national security team. Will Obrien be able to be such an effective operator? We'll have to see. But he will have this relationship with the Secretary of State, and it looks like Mike Pompeo will be able to have even more influence. He's already had an extraordinary amount so far in the Trump administration.
So, Margaret, let me